Welcome, dear students. Today we will talk with you about the international medical malpractice. First of all, we should decide, or we should say that improvement to medical practice and delivery of treatment is a very important thing all over the world. So the question of its regulation, its worldwide regulation, should be because, of course, if in different countries there is a possibility to improve some areas of medical regulation, medical treatment, the world regulation and the world experience is much more better than the ideas or the practice or just of one country. So as this question is rather important, we should focus on many international collaborations, on many legal regulations of this question, because it's not just the question of medical practice, it's also the question of medical legal regulation. So, delivering appropriate healthcare as well as implementation of research in low and middle income countries is compounded by resource allocation issues. So also, vulnerable populations continue to be seriously affected by non-communicable and infection diseases, including neglected tropical diseases, while complications during pregnancy and childbirth in these regions leave mothers and parents and infants at risk of severe disability or even death. So it's also medical problems. It's not just the only question, of course. It's just one of, and also the other outcomes are preventable and are very important to solve. So, as it's the international question, as it's the problem of the whole world, international organizations have created a large number of different acts regulating the activities of medical workers in various fields. Based on these provisions, each country has created a regulation in its legislation that complies with these international standards and meets the foundations of life in the country. So, the first area about which we will talk is genetic research. First of all, we should solve that genetic research is the study of human DNA to find out that genes and environmental factors contribute to diseases. Please put it in your notebooks. Also, when we talk about the result of genetic research, we should decide and solve that it's the subject of wide discussion, not only at the level of science directly involved in the problem, but also at the level of the public. As the genetic research goes through the question of not just about the information about the person out, public information, name, age, work, studying, and so on. It's also the question of the in questions of the personality, about the diseases, about the health, about all the unique information about the person. So the interest is due to the rapid development of genetic science, and not only in theoretical terms, but also at the level of practical implementation. So we should also say that all the international acts which regulate relations related to genetic research and the application of their results can be conditionally grouped in two. Yes. So the one group of acts is aimed to create a regulation environment for public relations in the field of this creation and use and turnover of genetically modified organisms, of course with the exception of humans. And the second group of international acts, it has the aim to create a regulatory environment for public relations related to human genomic research. I mean that at the first it's like more global, and at the second group it's more contract about the personality. So genomic research, human reproduction, preservation, turnover of relevant genetic material, processing of genetic information, possibility of commercial use of the results of genomic research in these areas and others. It's public relations related to scientific research and medical manipulation of human genome, totally human genome. So, if you talk about the first group, we talk about the group which includes the Convention of Biological Diversity, adopted with the participation of Russia in Rio de Janeiro in 1925. That's a mistake, a little mistake, sorry. It's popular with the name of Convention on Biological Diversity. Also, with this document, there is the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety on the Convention of Biological Diversity. It was created in Montreal in millennium. Also, it's popular like Cartagena Protocol. In addition, also international soft law acts adopted as part of the work of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, which is also rather popular in the world, but not signed by all the countries, just by the group of the countries. So, it was the first group. And if we talk about the second group, it will be not so contract. Why so? Because nowadays in the world there is no international act which can regulate the questions about the human genome. It means that at universal level in the world there are no legal binding document on the legal regulation of genomic research which can say what is possible, what is not possible, and can create standards of this area and create general principles for this regulation, for regulating the human rights and its protection. They say that it has a rather soft regulation, soft law, and we can't find out through these norms all the questions we need. But at the same time, we can find the necessary information in local country laws, or, for example, in laws of regional level. Of course, it's also the country regulation. Or, for example, some areas created for themselves the necessary documents for regulation. For example, Council of Europe has adopted the only international treaty whose provisions are directly devoted to genomic research. It's the Convention on the Protection of Human Rights and Human Dignity in connection with the application of advanced in biological and medicine. So the Convention of Human Rights and Biomedical, adopted by the Council of Europe. It was created in 1997, so you see already more than 20 years. In Europe they have the legal regulation of the question with biomedical research in human genome. But it's just the part of the whole document, and it regulates rather big, but not the whole area. So the question of the regulation can be divided on 3 levels. It's the level of the world, like world level, public level, and private level. If we talk about the private interest, let's start with them. Among the private interests, first of all, it's necessary to know the interest of this certain person, of individuals who, within the framework of the public relations under consideration, can act in various qualities. It's a patient, it's participant in scientific research, it's any unique individual, any person, but which is in this area take part. It seems that the main thing is that legally significant should focus on private interests. Of course, it's very important. It should focus on its freedoms and rights. And most, I even can say all the countries have their special regulation in this area, even if it's not specified by biological area, but it can be used in this area. But the second question, that there is no specific regulation. In this relation, there are a lot of interests which should be protected, and the first one is interests of different social groups, of people, different people, which can be under the control, which should be under the control of it. It can be from one side and from another. It can be business and medicine, and like some pharmacy corporations, for example, and also the independence, freedoms, rights, and interests of these certain individuals. So, if we talk about public interest, we can be attributed to the state, the purpose of which should be, first of all, to ensure the stability and security of the development of society, to maintain public consensus and balance, which determines the direction and vectors of interest in this case. So, as you see, the government which regulates the certain area on its territory, legal area on this territory, and finds the ways to protect interests of both sides. If we also go to the world, to the global area, we'll find out all those questions which we already talked before about the regulation all over the world and cooperation of different countries and different organizations in this sphere. So, the next thing we should talk about is genetic tests. First of all, genetic tests, it's the process which helps in researches and is needed to learn more about how genes contribute to health and diseases, as well as develop gene-based treatments. Sometimes the results doesn't give the certain answer, direct answer and help, but in the future it can be used, like from different parts it will be the result at the end. To make the research legal, there are special rules to prove that, not rules, rules, okay, to show that the research can be used just in certain situations, such as diagnostic tests, predicting and symptomatic genetic tests, carrier tests, like for tests about caring of a person. So the next one, prenatal testing. Next one, the pre-implantation genetic tests, newborn screening, pharmacogenetic tests, and that's all. Also, during these tests, sorry. So, genetic tests, I apologize. So, as you see, genetic tests is available just in certain situations, and we talk about privacy, we talk about the situation that it could be used just in certain conditions, which are possible in certain just conditions. For example, if we talk about sex, parentage, some ethic information, any information, color-wise, color of skin, any ideas of the person. So all the information, privacy information, usually is protected by the by the legal documents in every country. Of course, in the world there is a legal international document, but it's rather common, so better regulation will be on the territory of a certain country. So the next thing we will talk about is organ transplantation. Organ transplantation is a medical procedure in which an organ is removed from one body and placed in the body of a recipient to replace a damaged or missing organ. The donors, so persons which give the organ, and recipients, so persons which get this organ, may be at the same location, or organs may be transported from a donor site to another location. I think you saw in many movies or in some, for example, special videos when different organs can be moved from one country or one city to another in a position that the person which can get this organ is possible, his organism is possible to get this organ, because it's not like just the mechanism when the special detail, special item or gadget, for example, can be replaced in another, and it will work like the previous one. The body, I understand that all of you know, but she says the body of the human, of the person, it's much more serious and much more hard for researching mechanism. Organ is a mechanism. Okay. So I try to say that as the organism of a person, it's much more serious and much more difficult for understanding. It also says and also shows that it's not so easy to repair it. Not all the parts, of course. If you talk about the wound of a hand, for example, it's okay. But if you talk about the special organ, will be much harder to repair it. So, organs and or tissues that are transported within the same person's body are called autografts. Transplants that are recently performed between two subjects of the same species and are called allografts. So allografts can either be from a living or a cadaveric source. So if we talk about different organs, we can say that some of them, lungs, heart, pancreas, kidneys, skin, bones, and some others can be successfully transplanted, include for example, some femurs also, like some of the organs can be successfully transplanted. But if we will talk about some other organs like brain, for example, so it can't be transplanted. Some tissues such as bones, tendons, skin, nerves, some veins even, also can be transported from one person to another. Skin even can be moved in one body from one part to another in some circumstances. For example, when there was an accident with a burn, something like that. If we talk about worldwide practice, the kidneys are the most common transplanted organs, also the liver and the heart. If we talk about tissues, the most common are cornea and muscle skeleton grafts. Yes, they're most popular. So, talking about the types of organ transplantation, we can say that so the types which can be used types, yes. We can talk about the situation when there is some different circumstances which give us the classification of different types of donors and donor organs. Depending on this type, we can say that these organs can be used from alive persons or dead persons. First of all, the legal side of this question is that the organ can't be used without the permission of a person in any condition, if he's alive or he's dead. In some countries, even in some countries, it becomes bioethical question, because different religions and different persons and ideas can change the thoughts of the persons, and can't make them to choose the one or the other side. So, the main world question is organ trafficking, because moving from one country to another can take time, and not the organs can be saved for the long period, and the other situation that the trafficking can be illegal. It's the second problem. So, talking about living donor or cadaveric donor. So, the living donor can be related or unrelated with his rights and ideas. If talk about living donors, in living donors, the donor remain alive and donates a renewable tissues, cells, some other fluids, for example, such like blood. It can give skin, or it he can donate his organ in parts, and just a part can be given to another person. So usually these parts are those organs which can be regenerated, or it's hard to say that there is no use of the full organ, but like it can be workload in lower position, something like that. For example, donation of liver or lung lobe, like that. So, regenerative medicine may even someday, one day in future, create a situation when there will be laboratory grown organs, and it can be used in future, and it will be easy to renew some of organs. If we talk about deceased donors, formally it's also cadaveric. They are those people who have been declared brain dead and whose organs are kept viable by ventilators or other mechanical mechanisms until they can be excited for transplantation. Apart from brain stem dead donor, who have formed the majority of deceased donor for the last 2 years, there is increasing use of donation after circulatory death donors, formerly non-heart beating donors, they're called like that. So, this idea became moving in 1980s, so you see not the long period, but nowadays has a rather fast renewing of information and fast creation of this system. So you see, in the case, in different cases, a person can give the possibility of using his organs during his life or after his death, but in all cases it should be the certain legal position. usually it's a document which is signed by a person, and he or she understands all the future possibilities. So the next question we'll talk about is cloning. First of all, we should identify cloning as the creation of a genetically identical copy of a human. Now we just talk about human cloning, not cloning all over the world, but human cloning. The term is generally used to refer to artificial human cloning, which is the reproduction of human cells and tissues. But it doesn't refer to the natural conception and delivery of identical twins. It's not the same. About human cloning, there is a big number of debates. There are two categories of it, reproductive and therapeutic. First of all, we should say that both varieties of human cloning have important legal aspects, from ownership of genetic material, stem cells research, the dignity and respect of human life, reproductive rights of individuals, a lot of things, also rights, and so on. So, in bioethics, the ethics of cloning refers to a variety of ethical positions, but we'll talk about them a bit later. The first thing that we should solve is the law which regulates it. In the worldwide level, in 2020, it was reported the legal document which prohibited the human cloning, and about 70 countries has signed it. Also, in different countries, there is information about the human cloning, which is legalized on the territory of different countries. For example, in Russia, we have this certain federal law on the temporary ban on human cloning, which was created in 2002. It was created after the protocol, which was signed in Paris in 1998. So you see, Russia needed 4 years to create the local law to regulate. For example, in India, there is no specific law regarding cloning, but has guidelines prohibiting whole human cloning or reproductive cloning. So India allows just therapeutic cloning and the use of embryonic stem cells for research purposes. If we talk about Europe, the European Convention of Human Rights and Biomedicine prohibits human cloning in one of the additional protocols, but the protocol has been ratified only in Greece, Spain, and Portugal. So you see, some of the countries allows it or allows just partly cloning. So, talking about the human cloning and the process of human cloning, you can see that there's two kinds of human cloning. Reproductive and therapeutic. The reproductive tells about the cloned baby, and therapeutic tells about the embryonic stem cells. So you see, isolate somatic cell and so on. All these steps are on the screen, and you can see it by your own eyes. So the next thing that we should talk about is pros and cons of human cloning. As the idea of helping people, the clone, of course, is very good. So in this case, defective genes, leukemia, cancer, and some other diseases can be cured and help people to win with their problems. But if we talk about just therapeutic cloning of just parts of human, if we talk about the whole cloning, whole human cloning, of course, is the question of contours. So clones wouldn't have souls. They are just the big mechanism, biomedical mechanism, which is created by the medicine, but not by the nature way. It's easy to harm with this person to another one. For now, medicine is not so well worked that a clone can have heart, for example, or heart feeling or something like that. Also, they will not have individual life, and so on. So you see, the main idea is that the question is that it wouldn't be a human in the way of its usual understanding. So the next question we'll talk about is euthanasia. So first of all, euthanasia is the practice of in international end life to relieve pain or suffering. Of course, it's the very short understanding of this term because euthanasia it's much more wider than just the ending of life. Some doctors perform euthanasia when it's requested by people who have a terminal illness and are not in a lot of pain. In a lot of pain. So euthanasia it's a complex. It's a long process and involves many factors of it. Local laws, someone's position and mental health, personal beliefs, wishes, space, and others. Two sides which one wants the euthanasia and another one agrees with the euthanasia. There are different types of it, and those types divides from the different categories and from the points, from the main points. As you see, there are 6 different variants of euthanasia. The one category is passive and active. If you talk about passive, it's when a life sustaining treatment and withheld. If you talk about definition, it's not precious. And if you talk about active, it's direct inducement of a death. So, in the first way, no actions of other person, just stopping the help. And in other, there are special actions. Some such like some special help, special actions. For example, poison or something like that. Also, it's divided in 3 variants: voluntary, speculative, and involuntary. Voluntary, when euthanasia is considered with consent, is currently legal in Belgium and Luxembourg. So, first of all, euthanasia and its legal status all over the world is rather different. From none of possibilities to use euthanasia, and it's close to the death and killing, close to the killing, to possibility to use all of the variants of euthanasia. But in most countries, just some of variants. For example, if we talk about voluntary euthanasia, it's legal in Luxembourg, Netherlands, Switzerland, and so on. If we talk about speculative or non-voluntary euthanasia, in this situation, we talk about the euthanasia when the euthanasia is considered, is conducted on a person who is unable to consent due to this current health condition. Coma, infant, and so on. And in voluntary euthanasia, it's used and can be used when it's performed on a person who would be able to provide informed consent, but does not, either because they do not want to die, because they were not asked. So somebody decided for them. In all the countries, yes, in all the countries of the world, it's called murder, and it can be used. As you see, these 6 variants are rather different in small points, but rather different. So should understand that there are differences between euthanasia, and especially if we talk about involuntary euthanasia. So if we talk about different countries, you see that in different countries there are different acts which control the question of euthanasia, which lets it to be or doesn't let to be. In Germany, in Norway, Netherlands, in Russia, for example, no euthanasia, and so on. So if we talk about the controversy, arguments for and arguments against, so you see that there's a rather big number of such questions, such points, from the freedom of choice in an argument for, and the witness, for example, and dignity of person, for the arguments against. The main argument against is that the other person should act in it. Not all the persons will agree to let people die, especially when they're doctors. It breaks the way of a doctor. So the guilt, mental illness, and so on. Also, the main question is the legal regulation. There is a point about the assisted suicide. If we talk about it, we should talk about the question of the definition. The first definition is that it's intentionally helping a person commit suicide by providing drugs for self-administration at the person's voluntary and competent request. Also, some definitions include words "in order to relieve intractable suffering." So in this situation, the second person just help the first person to make a suicide, to make self-killing. But some countries in their legislation say that it also looks like the cooperation with the murdering of person. So it can be just understood in those countries which allow euthanasia to be legal. So we talked about controversially with you. Also, there are some ethical and religious questions, because in different countries people can understand it in different ways. So the next one, the last one, topic which we talk about is surrogacy. First of all, we should solve that surrogacy is a method or agreement whereby a woman agrees to carry a pregnancy for another person or persons who will become the newborn children's parents after birth. So one new lady, person, woman, which will help the other family. It doesn't mean that surrogacy uses just in a ways when a person or persons are rich and they don't want to be pregnant because of their body or something like that. No, there just can be a lot of medical problems, and so they need to use other person for surrogacy. In most countries, there are laws which regulates surrogacy. Some of them restrict or create the certain consequences of surrogacy. For example, in some countries there should be just a family, not one person. In other countries there should be just a family, man and a woman. In other countries, surrogacy is totally allowed, just not allowed, for example, payment for surrogacy, depending upon the traditions, history, nowadays, politics, and so on. So, intended parents may seek for the woman, create a surrogacy, and after her pregnancy, these children will be given to these parents, future parents. Of course, there are some risks. Of course, there are some questions. Of course, there are a lot of problems with the process, because it's rather long. Not 9 months. It's much longer. So most countries created laws and special regulation. Let's talk about types of surrogacy. First of all, there's the traditional and the gestation surrogacy. Traditional surrogacy, also known as partial genetic and straight surrogacy, involves natural and artificial insemination of a surrogate. In the intended father's sperm is used in the insemination, then the resulting child is genetically related to the intended father and genetically related to the surrogate. Gestation surrogacy, also known as host or full surrogacy, takes place when an embryo created by in vitro fertilization technology and is implanted in a surrogate, sometimes called a gestational carrier. So, depending upon this, depending upon the variant, there can be different regulations and in different countries. For example, if we talk about rights and obligations of surrogate mother and the positions of this mother, there can be such as the age, the health, the family, previous children which is born by her, not in surrogate way but in her own way, and others. For example, in such countries as France, Australia, Norway, Sweden, in some USA states, in United Arab Emirates, the surrogacy is completely prohibited. In some jurisdictions, is allowed, just only not commercial surrogacy. Great Britain, Canada, Israel, Netherlands, Denmark, some states of USA. For example, it can be made by the grandma of a future child. As she understands that her daughter can't have children, she can help her with this position. For example, in Belgium, Greece, Spain, Finland, and Russia, surrogacy, without Russia, Belgium, Greece, Spain, and Finland, surrogacy is not regulated by law, but actually there is situations of using it. And about legal countries, the countries which legalized the surrogacy, Ukraine, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Russia, and some others. Russia, terrible. Sorry. So in this country, there is legal regulation of this question. There are special laws for regulation of this question. Certain circumstances, the number of persons which take part in it, and so on. Important point when concluding a surrogacy agreement is the question of how much all parties involved in the progress are aware of the possible risks. So in Russia, for example, Russian Federation, for example, there is special organizations which help to find such mother, to check it, to make it legal, to make the deal, and to control all the situation across the process of surrogacy. So as you see, there are some important question. By the way, on international level, there is no legal document about surrogacy. So I hope this information was interesting for you, and it was all clear. So you got a good time on this point. I wish you a good day and say goodbye.